Okay, today is November 16th. It's 1 o'clock Eastern time for our Greek studies meeting. And I'd like to do something a little different today to help you with your studies in general, to make use of our Greek studies, to show you some other benefits of these studies that if you're conscious of them and learn to focus on them, will really help you. So I want to share a little background about my own teaching history, to give you an idea of what I want to talk about and why. I'm a classicist, obviously, but when I first started teaching, I taught in private schools. I was what's called an upper school classics teacher. Upper school is a name that's used to refer usually to high school level courses in private schools, preparatory schools. A preparatory school is a school where most of the kids are planning to go to college. So really it's a college prep school. That's what preparatory means. And one of the things that we have to focus on, of course, is getting the kids into selective colleges. That's really our job. So parents paid quite a bit. The tuition at the last school I taught at was close to $20,000 a year, and that's just day school. So kids were there from like 8 to 3, and their parents paid $20,000 a year, which is a pretty high tuition for day school. And when parents pay that, it's with the understanding that we're going to get their kids ready for admission to the top colleges and universities. So it puts a lot of pressure on the school, on the teachers, because we've got to deliver results. And what would happen is the kids would go through the curriculum, and then they'd get to their junior year of high school, 11th grade. They'd be around 17 years old, 17, 18, junior, senior year. And they'd realize that a very big part of college admission is the SAT, is their standardized test scores at that level. So when it came time for SAT prep, the school would ask me to teach an SAT prep course because it was pretty obvious that classical studies all of a sudden becomes really important when kids actually want to go on to college. So I was the SAT prep teacher. I taught at 3 different schools, just because I was sort of moving at that time in my life. So I taught at 3 different schools, and at every school I taught at, I became the SAT prep teacher. So I have background in SAT prep, and I'd like to help you with that because SAT prep, especially for you as homeschool students, is going to be very important. It's nothing to get stressed about because it's easy to prepare for, but I'd like to introduce you to things that you should be thinking about and preparing for so that you then have time to work on it and think about it, okay? The SAT, I just want to spend a few minutes talking about the SAT. The reason why it's important is because as homeschool students, no one knows what you're studying. Colleges don't know what you're studying. They don't know how you're studying. You could be studying way harder things than are available in schools, but nobody knows because you're studying privately. Your parents make decisions about your studies. For example, you're working with me. No one knows what I'm teaching you when we meet and things like that, what you're studying, what your tests are examining, all that stuff. All right. Well, it's not super easy. Super easy to take, but it's not super easy to get a good score on. All right. But the SAT is a test that is totally different from anything that you see in high school. It's a test that predicts something about your future. It's designed to predict whether you'll have success at college. That's what the SAT is designed to do. It's to predict college success, and it's very effective. Most of the people who complain about it are people who don't score well on it, and that's why they complain about it. But I'll give you a quick personal story about myself. I was not a good high school student. I was smart, but I didn't understand school. I didn't know what I was doing at school. I had bad teachers. My parents didn't really care about school because they were working class people. But I was a smart person in a school that I didn't understand, and I got bad grades because I just fooled around. I was the class clown. I goofed around, played sports, and I got bad grades because school wasn't important in my family. But then in my junior year, no, I didn't crash. There's no video problem on my side. In my junior year, we took the SAT, and I scored one of the highest scores in my school. and it sort of shocked everybody because this goofball, who plays sports and is the class clown, all of a sudden pulled off one of the highest SAT scores in the school. And what I realized when I took that, well, what I realized was that I knew that I was smart, smart. My teachers always told me I was smart. I always felt like I was smart, but I didn't study. And I didn't think about going to college or anything like that. But then when I took the SAT and got a high score, everyone was like, that's a test that suggests that you'd be successful in college, so you need to get your act together. So for me, the SAT was like the first step in getting started with studies, because the SAT was the first thing in my life that really said, you need to take this seriously. You can be successful in college. And it turned out to be true. I went on to be a straight A student in college, even though I was a terrible high school student. So the SAT for me was a very significant moment in my life, because it was the beginning of my discernment of my vocation in academics. It's designed to predict success in college studies, because college studies are very different than high school studies, all right? And it's very effective, but you've got to prepare for it because it's a test that's not like any other test you take in high school. In high school, you study a lesson and then you take a test about that lesson. You study a lesson, you complete an assignment about that lesson. You're always given the material and then tested on that material in high school. You just have to reproduce the information and you get good grades in school. The problem is college doesn't work like that. College is much looser, much freer, and you're asked to think a lot more and work a lot more on your own. So there's different skills that are needed, and the SAT is designed to test those different skills. It's divided into two parts, really into three parts, but two main parts. One is language testing and the other is mathematics. All right. So there's two parts of the SAT. It's going to test your language skills and your mathematics skills, but it's not going to test any of the stuff that you do in math classes in high school. It's going to test your ability to solve problems you've never seen before by reasoning and using what you know to figure out ways to solve new problems. So it's different. And with the language studies, it's not going to ask you things you studied in English class or anything in high school. It's going to ask you to figure out the meanings of vocabulary words. It's going to ask you questions about grammar. It's going to ask you questions about passages that you have to read, things that you've never seen before, passages that are intentionally chosen because they're boring, and the people who make the test know that high school students won't understand any of the content or they've never read it before. So it's designed to test. Well, it's similar to Iowa tests, but it's got very specific skills in mind, but are called college success skills. All right. You've got to prepare for the SAT. You've got to prepare specifically to take the SAT to score well. And you need to do that. You can start that as soon as you want, but junior year in high school, normally students take the SAT. Senior year, you can take it again. You can take it as many times as you want, but junior and senior. Now, for you guys, most of you, you're lucky because most colleges, because of COVID, are not requiring the SAT for another year or two. Okay, so some of you may not even need to take the SAT. But at the same time, when you're homeschooled, it's a good idea to take the SAT if you can score well, because it sort of proves that everything is okay with your homeschool studies. All right, it's just a way to remove any doubt. So it's a good idea to take the SAT, and you need to prepare for it to score well. But one of the most important things on the SAT is vocabulary, right? It puts a lot of stress on your vocabulary skills, because in college, you're going to be forced to read high-level stuff in lots of different subjects, and you're not going to be familiar with it. You're going to have to read, at 1 hour of the day, you're going to be working in a science class. Then in another hour, you're going to be in an art appreciation class. Then you may have a foreign language class. Then you may have a politics class or a history class. You're going to have a wide range of courses that you need to study, and they're all going to have their own vocabulary, and it's going to be at a higher level than you're used to. So You know how I teach you guys how you have to use the context to figure out the meaning of words, right? We do that like in Aesop, in all your studies, really. That ability to figure out the meanings of words based on context becomes very important in college. You've got to learn how to do that. And you've got to try as much as you can to build your vocabulary, to develop a vocabulary that's, sufficient for success in college studies. And so the question then is, well, how in the world can I build my vocabulary? Should I start studying the dictionary? Should I just get a dictionary and start reading through and learning all the words, memorizing the words? Well, yeah, sure, that would be great. But there's one problem with that. What's the problem with that? What's the problem with learning vocabulary from the dictionary? What's the problem with that plan to build your vocabulary? Yeah, you can use the Oxford Dictionary. You know how many words are in the Oxford Dictionary? I think it's over 70,000 words, right? So you're not going to be able to build your vocabulary by studying a dictionary. There are too many words. And that's not the way that a wise person studies anything. The way a wise person studies, just as we do in grammar. Let's think about grammar for a minute. In grammar, there are thousands and thousands of words, but what do we study in grammar? We don't study words in grammar. What do we study in grammar? What do we study in grammar? No. What do we study in grammar? Parts of speech. Good, James. We study the parts of speech. All right. I'm asking specifically in grammar, what do we study? We study the parts of speech. And the parts of speech are 7 or 8, maybe 10, depending on how we divide them, classes of words, right? So we don't study the words themselves because there's tens of thousands of words. And that's multiplied because there's all different forms as well. So we don't study words in grammar, we study the parts of speech. And who can tell me, I'm not asking you to give me the names of the parts of speech, but what really are the parts of speech? What are they? Don't give me the names of them. Just what are they? What are the parts of speech? Who can tell me what the parts of speech are? What are the parts of speech? No, not about structures of sentences. Categories. That's good, Victor. Categories. All right. There are different groups that all words can be put into. So there are different categories or different classes of words. So there's thousands and thousands of substantives, and there's thousands of adjectives, and there's thousands of verbs, and hundreds of pronouns. And there's all these words, but we can put them all into 8 categories. So one of the problems when you're follow me, just follow me. I've got some difficult things to explain. One of the things when you're an ignorant person, or you enter into some field of study where you're ignorant, one of the problems that you have is it just seems like there are a million different options. That's what's confusing, because you can't recognize patterns, you can't recognize categories of things, and it just looks like there's a million things going all over the place. Like if you've never played football, and I'm talking about American football, for example. If you've never played football and you turn on a football game, it just looks like people are moving all over the place. There's all kinds of stuff going on, and you can't make any order out of it. And over time, as you get more experience, you start to recognize things like, oh, okay, this is the offense and this is the defense. Okay, there's different groups of players. These are the linemen. These are the skill players. And you start to understand different aspects of the game, and you can start to recognize patterns. You see things. And then when you start to see patterns, you can then start to compare things. Okay, you can start to understand what's going on. But when you first start, it just looks like there's a bunch of guys, there's all these people, they're running all over the place, and it's just chaos everywhere. You have to actually become familiar with it to start to recognize the order. And what wisdom is to understand the order of a thing. That's what it means to be wise. But when you're first starting, you don't have that knowledge. You don't have that ability to recognize or understand the order. Or you might identify something and think it's order, but you're focusing on something that's actually not important. And that's actually not the order of a thing. Okay, so when you come to vocabulary, and please follow me on this, when you come to vocabulary, it looks like there are just endless lists of words. There are just thousands and thousands of words. It seems like the words just go on forever, and you feel like you're in an ocean of words, and most of them you just don't know. That's how it feels because you're ignorant of the languages, okay? When you actually take up the study of the language, you start to realize it's actually very simple. It's actually not complicated at all. We just have to understand how the language is ordered, how the words are ordered, and then we study them in groups. And so it actually becomes quite easy. That's how the parts of speech help us. We can just say, what can we know about nouns? Well, we can know that nouns are the names of things. We can know that nouns have certain characteristics. Nouns have gender, they have number, they have case. So all of these thousands and thousands of words, they all have something in common, and we can recognize that and start to see some order in the language. And we can compare words and things like that. We're not lost in an ocean of random words anymore. We can say, okay, these are nouns. They have gender, number, case. They name things. That's what they do. So that's one category. And then there's another category. There's pronouns. Okay, so there's all these words, and these words are used to point out a thing without naming it. They're used in place of nouns. So there's all these other words that we can understand they belong to this category called pronouns. So what can we know about pronouns? Well, there's different persons, they have gender, they have number, they have case, okay? They have different uses. We can start to recognize patterns. We can compare and contrast things, and our language starts to have order. And we can keep doing that by studying the other parts of speech. So grammar brings order to language. That's the reason we study it. And that's what it means to be wise with respect to language, okay? We start to recognize the real categories, the real patterns, the real order in language. And that's what it means to have mastery of a language. Okay, we look at a language not as just this endless flood of random words, but we understand what's going on in the language. We know where the words are coming from. We know what different kinds of words there are. We know what different functions the words are serving. And you start to learn that order of language through the study of grammar, okay? So you're not left to study every word. You're not left in this ocean of language. You learn the categories of the words, which are the parts of speech. You learn the characteristics of each of those categories. And now you know something about every word. Okay, you just have to categorize it, and then you know the characteristics of that part of speech. So what's the key here is that we study classes of things. We don't study individual things, we study classes of things. We learn the characteristics of classes of things, and then those characteristics apply to any individual in that class. That's how intelligent people bring order to their thinking about different subjects. That's what it means to be wise, okay? So we don't study individual words, we study classes of words, right? Now, when it comes to vocabulary, and this is where I'm going with all this, when it comes to vocabulary, how in the world are we going to organize vocabulary words, right? If we just want to understand the meanings of words, how can we organize vocabulary words? We're not talking about grammar. We're not talking about organizing words according to their functions and sentences and characteristics and things like that. That's a grammatical order of language. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about just learning the meanings of words, right? If I see a word, how can I figure out the meaning of that word? Because where did these words come from? All the words that we see, where did they come from? Answer that for me. All the words we see, every book, every paper, every single thing you see words on, where do those words come from? There's tens of thousands of words. Where do they come from? They do not come from God. They do not come from ideas. Where do all these words come from? I'm talking about the words themselves. Where do the words come from? No, they're made up by men, right? It's very simple. They're made up by men. Okay. We talked about this the other day when we were looking in sacred scripture class. We talked about when Adam names all the animals, right? The names came from a man. A man made up the names. All the words that we see, the names were made up by men. And so it's not all random craziness. These words, were coined. That's the word for, making a word for an idea. These words, all of them, every word we see everywhere was formed by a man, by some man at some point. There's reason behind words. There's reasons why the words look the way they do. There's reasons behind the different ways men have come up with names for things. And so we don't want to sit here and learn all of the individual words. We want to understand that reasoning. We want to understand the system or the principles by which the words were actually developed. And then we can sort of work backwards and go from the word to its meaning. Okay. So we want to be able to understand principles in vocabulary, and we want to be able to study words in groups, but we have to figure out what should those groups be? What should those groups be? And this is where the classical languages come to help us. Words are composed of parts, just like anything else. They're composed of parts. Words are names for things that are presently unknown. They're things that don't yet have names. And so when we come up with a new name, we've got to use what we already have to form a new name, a new word. So new names come from old names. New words come from old words. And when we look at a language like English, we ask, well, where did these words come from? Where did the English words come from? Who can tell me where English words come from? Give me some sources. Where do English words come from? Where do English words come from? Latin and Greek, that's two sources, but that's not all the sources. Where else do they come from? Where do English words come from? Germanic languages, right? European languages, let's say. Okay, good. They come from older forms of English, like Old English, which is another European language, German, French. All right, so we can go back. Yeah, we can go back. That's good. That's enough. We can go back and understand that there are languages that our words were drawn from. And when we learn those languages, when we learn about those languages, all of a sudden our English language and our English words are not mysteries anymore. Okay, when we become familiar with other languages, we can look at English words and say, oh, I know where that word came from. This isn't complicated. This isn't all mysterious and random. I can look at that word and know where that word came from. I may not know exactly what this word means, but I have an idea of what it means because I can recognize one or more parts of that word, and I know what that part means. All right. So with vocabulary, there's tens of thousands of words. You're not going to learn them all like a dictionary. And so the way that we go about learning vocabulary is by studying languages that our language came from. Because when we learn one Greek word, it can unlock the meaning of dozens of English words. All right. So you can choose study dozens of English words or study one Greek word. That's really how vocabulary study works. So those who study classical languages, they will have a much better grasp of vocabulary than those who don't. And even if we say, well, what about European languages like French and Spanish? Many of them are also drawn from Latin and Greek, so they're not as helpful as just going back to the ancient languages, okay? So the way to build our vocabulary is not by sitting down and making flashcards for thousands and thousands and thousands of English words. That's not going to work. Those students who do things like that, who try to learn vocabulary by studying, just by reading more or studying words, they really don't make much progress, and the language remains a mystery for them. But we have the opportunity to study Greek and Latin, and as we do so, we're going to see that dozens of words are unlocked to us every time we learn a new word. And that's the value of classical language study. So what I want to do today, in light of everything I just said, is start looking at the Greek vocabulary lessons and showing you how to do this. All right. I want to show you how to actually learn vocabulary, to become very comfortable with English vocabulary by studying classical languages. All right. So I'm going to show you how to do it. Studying Greek by itself or Latin by itself doesn't really help you. You've got to do something with that knowledge. And I want to show you what to do with it. Now, if you're lazy and you don't do this, well, you're just not going to build your vocabulary, and that's your own fault. But if you really want to build your vocabulary, I'm going to show you how to do it, okay? And it's up to you to do it. So if we look at our Greek vocabulary lesson, and I'm going to share my screen here. One second. Let me share my screen. So I've got, just so you know, I published the lesson 2 Greek vocabulary today. So lesson 2 is available now. But I want to show you what to do, right? Why study this? Because studying this is not going to change your vocabulary unless you work with it, right? So if we look at this vocabulary lesson, we can learn these Greek words, right? This first word, aether, means sky, and the Latin form of it is aether, just like the Greek. They're the same word, all right? Latin and Greek, aether. So we've got this Greek word, and we want to think about the stem. So let's just take A-I-T-H, right? If we transliterate it, we would have A-I-T-H. And we see that even in Latin, it would be A-E-T-H, so they're similar. So we learn this Greek word. We've got this idea, aether means sky, all right? So what we do is we go to the Oxford English Dictionary, all right? And what we do is we just start typing this word. We look at aeth. Let's look at eth, A-E-T-H. And so we can start to see, well, there's all kinds of words that start with these letters. Let's go back to A-I-T-H, all right? All these words, but it looks like A-E-T-H, looks like the Latin stem is more common. One thing, because this is a diphthong, we can also just check without the diphthong because sometimes it's dropped. But we'll see all sorts of words, right? Like here's one, ethereal. Now look at this word. I think I'm signed in, so it should be okay. Meaning and use. No, 1 second. Let me sign in real quick. I thought I was signed in. We have this word ethereal. Ethereal. If you saw that word in an English reading, you'd probably have no idea what it meant. But if you look at the meaning, ethereal means of or relating to heaven. All right. So aether, or in Greek or Latin, aether means heaven or the sky. Ethereal means relating to the heaven or relating to the sky. So if you saw that word in English, you would say, I never saw that word before. I have no idea what that means. But if you've studied Greek and Latin, you can say, you know what? I've never seen that word before. I don't know exactly what it means, but I could take a good guess, right? I could take a good guess what that word means based on, what I see in it. I know this word ether comes from the Latin aether, which means the sky. So it probably has something to do with the sky. And for most uses, for most purposes, that would be enough to help you. That would be enough to help you understand the meaning of the word, all right? Now, the dictionary will give you the exact meaning, but usually you don't need that. You just need a general sense of what the word means, and that's enough to build your vocabulary. So ethereal means relating to heaven or relating to the sky. So anything that's in the heavens, anything that's heavenly is ethereal. And that also builds your vocabulary because it gives you a new word that you can use. Okay, so that's an example. Ethereal is derived, from aether. All right, so let's try another one. So if we just look up aether, we know we've got this word aether from Latin. Now, when you look up a word, it just sends us back to ether, you see. when you look up a word, if you look, the Oxford English Dictionary gives you a bunch of tools to use up here. One of them is etymology. That's the history of the word. But there's another tool over here, compounds and derived words. And if you click on that, it'll list a bunch of words that are derived from that word. And so you can see all of these words like etheromania, right? Addiction to the use of ether. So you can go through these different words. It gives you all these words that are derived from the word that you're messing around with. And you can slowly build your vocabulary. But I want to get some better examples. So that's aether, or aether, that's the first word. Let's look up aster, right? The second word, which means star. So let's go back to the Oxford English Dictionary. And we just type in ASTR because that's the stem of aster, astros. And you can see all these words that come from it, right? Astronomer, astronomy, astronomical, astrology, astronaut, astral, astrologer. All these words that begin with this Greek stem or this Greek root. Now, again, you might not know exactly what all these words mean, but it's okay because usually you'll just need a general idea because the context of what you're reading will provide the other material, okay? Plus, as you continue to build your vocabulary, you'll recognize other parts of the word as well. For example, when I see astro, what does that mean? I know what that means. What does astro mean? What does astro mean? When I see astro, I know what that means. Sorry, all these dopey pop-ups. When I see astro, what does that mean? What does astro mean? It means star, good. But then I also see the second part of this word, N-O-M, nom. And if I study Greek, I know that nomos means law, right? So what is an astronomer or astronomer? What is an astronomer? Take a guess. We know astro refers to star in Greek, and N-O-M comes from nomos, which means law. Yeah, it's a person who seeks to understand the law or the order of the stars, okay? The natural laws by which they operate. An astronomer. Astronomy is the study of the law of the stars, okay? So that's good. Here we have another one, astrology. Well, I know what astro means. That means star. And then I know this L-O-G comes from logos, right? Now I could say, well, logos means word, but it means more than that. And if you study the word, you would know more of the meaning. It goes on to also mean science, okay? Logos is a reckoning or a science of something. So if I have astrology, what does that mean? Astrology, the science of the stars. Yeah, the science of the stars, okay? If I look at astronaut, right? Astronaut. And I know that naut means a sailor, like nautical, right? It means relating to sailing. Astronaut, I have these two words. Yeah, Henry, that's right. It means a person who sails through the stars or sails to the stars, all right? So you can see how as your vocabulary builds, it doesn't tell you exactly the details of what the word means, but it gives you an understanding of, let's say, 75 to 80% of the meaning of the word, and the rest you can figure out from context. Now, also remember that when you take a test like the SAT, it's usually a multiple choice test, right? It's usually a multiple choice test. So explain to me, tell me, how can this help you if you're working on a multiple choice test? How would this understanding of vocabulary help you if you're working on a multiple choice test? How would this help you on a multiple choice test? The SAT is multiple choice. Yeah, you can cross out words that aren't even close. Like if you saw astronomer, you could cross out trumpet, you could cross out dog, you could cross out tree. And if the last option had something to do with star, you would say that's probably the right answer because I know astro comes from star, You see, so, well, it's that, yes, I would say if you learn how to take the test, it is easy. It's easy if you learn how to take the test, okay? So you can see, especially when you're taking a multiple choice test, just having a decent sense of the meaning of a word. Yeah, I just came up with a random example. Just having a decent sense, a good sense of the word can help you to eliminate false options and choose the right answer, okay? So if you're close, that's good. Let's go back to the vocab. We've just got other words in here. Obviously, kometes, that's easy. Planetes, that's easy. We've got Kronos, Zeus, Ares, Helios. Let's take this word, Helios, right? And bring it over to the Oxford Dictionary. Now, one thing you'll notice here is they give you one option where it's Helio with a hyphen after it. That means it's going to be words derived from Helio, okay? If I click on that, it'll show me words that come from Helio, just the word itself. But more importantly, if I go back there, if I just take something like heliocentric, okay? Or let's look at these words real quick. Heliocentric, what do you think that means? Heliocentric, sun-centered, good. What about, let me edit this real quick. Let's see, heliograph. What do you think heliograph means? Now, many of you will think graph and you'll think of some kind of chart, but that's not what graph means. The Greek word graphe means writing, right? It means writing. So what is a heliograph? What is heliograph? If you saw that word and you had some knowledge of Greek, you would say it has something to do with sun and writing. Yes, something to do with sun and writing. So what do you think that might possibly be? What do you think a heliograph might possibly be? Think about it. A person came up with that word, right? It didn't come out of, it didn't fall to the earth from outer space. Somebody decided to call something heliograph. What do you think it is? A writing of the sun, writing about the sun. Well, let's check it out. Let's see what it means. Heliograph, okay? A name given to an engraving obtained by a process in which a specially prepared plate is acted upon chemically by exposure to light. All right, so it's a chemical process where an engraving is obtained by a process where a specially prepared plate is acted upon by exposure to light. So it's engraving that's actually caused by light. Heliograph, all right? So you can see the meaning of those two words is present. Let's go back to helio. Let's see if we can find another one. Heliostat. Let's see what heliostat means. Heliostat, an apparatus consisting of a mirror turned by clockwork to reflect the light of the sun in a fixed direction. Heliostat. If we look at the etymology, it'll tell us, it tells us that the part stat comes from the Greek word statos, which means standing, and helio obviously comes from sun. And it gives us this link, which will give us a list of tons of words that come from helios. Here we have heliophobic. What does phobic mean? I know you can see the meaning here, but phobic. What does phobic mean? What does phobic mean? Phobos in Greek means fear, okay? Phobos means fear. So heliophobic means, it doesn't necessarily mean fear as one who's afraid of something. It means one who tries to avoid something, all right? So let's say you have light skin and you don't want to get burned when you go to the beach, so you try to stay in the sun. You're heliophobic. That doesn't mean that you're afraid of sunlight. It means you're trying to avoid sunlight, okay? Not fear of the sun. You're not a crazy person who is trying to dig a hole and escape from the sun. It means you're trying to avoid the sun, usually for some ordinary reason, okay? Here we have another word. This one should be easy. Heliology. Heliology. Look at heliology. We know that helio means sun, and that ology part comes from logos, which means science. We have the science of the sun's energy, okay? Now, the reason why I'm showing you this is when you learn the word helios, you learn one Greek word, but what that does for you is unlock all of these words. And this is just a sample. There's many, many, many more, okay? So you could sit there and try to memorize the meaning of all of these words in English, or you could just learn the Greek words, learn Greek vocabulary, and then use that to unlock dozens and dozens of words, okay? Here's another one I thought was pretty cool. Heliolatry. Where'd it go? Heliolatry. That's a name for sun worship. Heliolatry. A heliolater is a sun worshiper. So people who love to go to the beach, they love to lay on the beach, get a suntan, we can call them heliolaters, right? So all these words, heliophobia, those who try to get away from the sun, most white-skinned people who just cook when they go in the sun. Heliophilus, this is the opposite. Heliophilus means to be fond of or attracted to the sunlight. Philia, right, is the opposite of phobos. That means it means love. So one who likes or loves the sun is the opposite of heliophobic. Okay. So the point is, once we learn these Greek words, each of them is going to unlock a whole group of English words for us. And that's the intelligent way to build our vocabulary. Okay. So this is also why it's important to practice transliteration, which I've explained to you, and why I have you do transliteration exercises, because transliteration will help you to recognize the Greek words in English words, all right? So I recommend these Greek vocabulary lessons if you're going to use them in the way that I show you today, okay? Learn these vocabulary words, but then you have to do something with them. And what you do with them, one thing you can do with them is take them over to something like the English Oxford Dictionary and just type them in and see what happens. In the second lesson, we study fire. In the second lesson, we study fire, and the Greek word for fire is pour, which is P-Y-R, which transliterates into English as P-Y-R. So if I just type P-Y-R into the Oxford English Dictionary, I'll start to see a bunch of different things. I see pyramid, and I've got to ask myself, does pyramid come from the Greek word fire? Some people think it does, some people think it doesn't. But the word pyre, however, actually is an English word that just means fire, pile or heap of wood or other combustible material. So a pyre is like a bonfire, would be a pyre, right? A pile of stuff that burns. And then we would set that pyre on fire, sorry. If we go to compounds and derived words, we'll see some words derived from that. For example, we'll see the word pyral. Pyral means of or relating to a pyre, of or relating to fire, okay? We can also go to the etymology. We can click on that word pyre, and then we can look at the etymology for pyre, and we see it's from the ancient Greek word pura or pur, which means fire. Then it gives us a link to pyro, which is a combined form that's used in English words, and we'll get a whole list of words that come from pyro, okay? So you can get these lists right from the English dictionary. Here's a good word, pyromachy or pyromachy. Pyromachy means the use of fire in combat. Machy, the idea of machy has the idea of fighting or war. Pyromachy or pyromachy, I'm not sure how it would be pronounced, where the accent would be, but I can check that out. I can check that out. Hopefully I can check it out, maybe not. It's very rare, the use of fire in combat. Oh, here's our pronunciation. It's pronounced pyromachy. Yeah, pyromachy. That's what I said. I had it right. Pyromachy. So I can get the pronunciation, I can learn the meaning, the use of fire in combat. I can see the etymology or history of the word. I can see that it comes from pyro. And then I can keep going. Pyroscope. What do you think pyroscope means? Pyroscope. Pyroscope. Think microscope, telescope, pyroscope. What are some ideas? Now, you might not know exactly what it means, but that's okay. Because as long as you can get close by your knowledge of the origins, it's good enough in most cases. Is there a way to use the Oxford Dictionary through the CLAA? Yeah, you go to oed.com. Then you go to log in. And when you log in as an institution. And the username and password is OEDCLAA. Okay. Don't log in as an individual. The login won't work. You have to log in as an institution because you're logging in as a student in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. So you can use the CLAA login. Okay. So pyroscope, we know microscope, telescope. Scope doesn't mean large. Think microscope, that wouldn't make any sense. Microscope. What do you think microscope would mean? You can take a guess. Obviously, I don't think you know what pyroscope means. What does pyroscope mean? Take a guess. Pyroscope. Think microscope, think telescope. You can see what scope means. No, it's got nothing to do with a microscope. We're just taking that second part, scope. Something that enlarges something. So you think that a scope has something to do with enlarging things? I can understand why you'd say that. Well, look at the definition for pyroscope. Any of several instruments for measuring or estimating the temperature of a heat source. Okay. An instrument used for measuring or estimating the temperature of a heat source. So we can see that this word scope has to do with an instrument, right? All of these things, microscope, telescope, they're instruments. An instrument used that has something to do with fire, right? And if you could figure out that much, in most cases, that would be helpful. That would be helpful for you. We have pyronomics. Pyronomics. I said before that nomos means law. Pyronomics, the branch of science concerned with the phenomena and uses of heat and fire. Study of the law of fire. Yeah. Pyromorphous. Pyromorphous. This definition is not going to help us very much, but we know what pyro means, fire. Morphous. What does morphous mean? Any clue what morphous means? Morph. What does morph mean? Any clue? Change is a good guess. Change is a good guess. Form, shape, right? That's what morph means. Morph means form or shape. Okay. So if something was pyromorphous, it would mean shaped like fire. Okay. Good. Pyrophobia. Pyrophobia. Fear of fire, right? Pyrophobia. Pyrophilia would be love of fire. What is a pyromaniac? What is a pyromaniac? Pyromania. What is pyromania? A pyromaniac. What do you think? Fire using psychopath. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, somebody who likes setting stuff on fire. A person who's always playing with fire. A pyromaniac. Yeah. Okay. So the point is, when you study this Greek vocabulary, it's only going to be useful and helpful if you work with it. Okay. So you've got to do some study with it. You've got to use the Greek and Latin vocabulary you learn, run it through a tool like the Oxford English Dictionary, and see what you can find. And what you'll start to notice patterns. Like I said, you'll start to notice patterns, and language won't feel random anymore. It won't feel chaotic. You'll start to realize as you continue to learn vocabulary, Greek and Latin vocabulary, you'll start to recognize more and more words, and you'll realize there's really not a whole bunch of different meanings. it's really not that complicated. There aren't millions and millions of words with all different, they all have different meanings. That's really not true. There's really just a limited number of sources that words are drawn from. And if you know those sources, you can really understand thousands and thousands of words, okay? So it takes some time, but you'll start to recognize that. But the only way you'll do it is if you study Greek and Latin vocabulary and then put that vocabulary to work a little bit. There's a game, like a puzzle that's in puzzle books where they'll give you a word, like, for example, like this. They'll give you some letters like they'll give you a word like stenography, something like this, and they'll say, how many words can you form using the letters in the word stenography? And you can say, oh, I can make the word goat. I can make these different words, right? Grant. There's a game like that. Well, I'd like to challenge you to do the same thing with Greek and Latin vocabulary. If you learn a Greek word like helios, if you learn a word like helios, I'm not asking you to use the letters, but the meaning of the word. I challenge you to spend time, almost as a game, trying to think of or find as many words as possible that come from helios, like heliocentric. All these kinds of words that we've been looking at. Heliocentric. We saw heliolatry, right? The worship of the sun. We saw heliophobic. And if you just exercise yourself, treat it almost like a game and think of and find as many words as you can that are derived from that Greek or Latin word, you'll start to be able to recognize these things in English more easily, and it'll become orderly and simple for you, okay? So if you want to build your vocabulary from Greek and Latin roots, this is the kind of stuff you have to do. You can't just study the Greek words. You can't just study Latin words. You've got to also work with it a little bit and start to learn how the English words are formed using these ancient stems, okay? So that's what I wanted to introduce you to today. And the reason I wanted to introduce it is because in future lessons in Greek and Latin, I'd like to spend some time doing this kind of thing as we learn new words. I'd like to introduce you to new vocabulary, but I wanted you to have this general idea in your head. So when I do it, you understand what I'm actually doing, okay? So these Greek vocabulary lessons, I've got 2 published so far. They're slow for me to publish because I'm using an old Greek textbook, as you know. I don't know if I have it up on my screen here. I don't think I do. I'm using an old textbook, and it would be impossible for you guys to read, which is why I don't have you work from that textbook. But I'm going to retype the lessons for you so they're easy to read. And if you study through them, you'll be able to quickly build your English vocabulary, which is great preparation for the SAT by actually studying the classical languages, okay? Any questions about this? I know it's pretty simple, but I want you to see the process. The main tool to use is the Oxford English Dictionary, which I showed you. Another good tool, there's another dictionary online. It's free to use, so you don't need any login or anything like that. Another good dictionary is the American Heritage Dictionary, okay? The American Heritage Dictionary, and what I want to show you right here at the top of the page, you see they've got a section on the front page of the website. It says Indo-European and Semitic roots appendices. Now that's a big bunch of word salad, but Indo-European roots is important for vocabulary building. Indo-European roots. So Indo-European refers to all languages that are derived from ancient European languages. What's cool about this is if you just scroll through this, it gives you part of a word like ad, right? And we know this from Latin. We know the preposition ad, but it shows you how that particle of a word, ad, was used. It has a basic meaning, to, near, or at, and it's used in all of these words that are derived from it. And it gives you a bunch of examples of how the word is used in deriving other words. And you can just go through the particle ag, ag. It has the general meaning to drive, to draw, or to move. And so when you see that particle in English words, that ag, it's going to have something to do with ag, meaning to draw or to drive or to move. Okay. And so this is just another good way to build vocabulary by learning these Indo-European roots and how English words are derived from them. And if you go through, you'll recognize some of them. Some of them will be new to you, but that's one of the important tools that the American Heritage Dictionary provides us with. So my lesson for you today is, if you want to build your vocabulary, you need to study roots of words. And you can do that by studying Greek and Latin vocabulary, obviously, but you have to learn how to use that vocabulary to understand more English words. You have to use it and work with it by entering it in, transliterating it, and then entering it into the Oxford Dictionary and finding words derived from that Greek or Latin word. You can also use the Indo-European Roots Index that's available with American Heritage Dictionary. Another source, this is a book on the CLAA website. This is a book on the CLA website that actually does this. It could be a course if I put it together. But it's a book on word building where this author, I mean, he sounds like a nerdy guy. His name is Brainerd. You know, that's about as nerdy a name as you can get. Imagine some parents naming their kid Brain Nerd, right? They really had him set aside for education. Brainerd. No, actually, it's not that crazy. There's a famous person named David Brainerd in early American history, but Brainerd looks like a pretty nerdy name. But Brainerd Kellogg, that's the author of this book. Brainerd Kellogg and Alonzo Reed, they put this book together that teaches this whole idea of vocabulary building in a textbook. So if you want to, you could go through this book and I'll show you what it does. It explains all the stuff that I just explained, the meanings and roots of roots and stems, understanding derivatives and compounds, how prefixes and suffixes work. And then once you get through this general instruction in how words are formed, it shows you how you take a basic word, like they give you one here, this frang, and it shows you how it's used to form a whole bunch of different words. And it's just a textbook that teaches vocabulary. I'll stick a link to it in the chat here. So if you want to, just go to that book, download it onto your computer, and you've got it, okay? And you can use that book to study vocabulary if you'd like to. I should make that a course. I started to a few years ago, but I just don't have time right now. But it should be a course in the CLEA. Very helpful, okay? So that's another good resource. All right, so that's it for today. Just an overview and introduction to how to use classical language studies, classical vocabulary studies to develop your vocabulary. I'm sorry if that was chaotic and messy as far as my lesson goes, but that's what I wanted to introduce you to. So from now on, as we go through these vocabulary lessons and learn new words in Greek reading or even Latin reading, I can stop and make some comments about vocabulary and you'll find them helpful, okay? Right. It feels chaotic to me because it just, these live classes, I don't have time to like prepare any kind of scripted lesson or anything like that. I just think of what I'd like to talk with you about, and then I, wing it when we have our meetings. So sometimes if I feel like a class meeting we have is a little chaotic, or I think I could make it clearer for you, I'll just do an additional video by myself to clarify things. But hopefully we can make it clear enough in these live meetings because it allows us to get through a lot of material quickly. Okay. So, well, you have to learn to wing it when you've got a lot of work to do. But I've been doing this a long time, I'm not really winging it. It's just that to do it today, I probably decided what I wanted to talk to you about today at about 12 o'clock. So I had about a half hour to get things together and go through it. All right. So anyway, I hope that's helpful. We'll be talking about this in future lessons from now on, now that I know you're familiar with it. But at least we were able to get through that today and get a good idea of what's to be done to build your vocabulary. Okay. So any questions? Any concerns or questions? That's all for today. So you're free to go if you've got to get rolling. If you've got any questions about this or any of your other studies, I'll hang out with you as long as you need me to. All right. All right. So thank you, Judah. Any questions? Use this time we have together for just any study issues, anything you need help with or would like to talk about. Do chronos and chronos have the same or different meanings? That's a good question. We know that chronos, right? Let me just type this in here. We know that chronos, which means time, comes from chi, ch, okay? Chronos means time, like chronology is the study of time, the science of time. Chronos is that name for Zeus. Let me look it up real quick in my dictionary. Let me see if chronos with a kappa comes from is the same as with chi. One second, I'm going to look it up. Chronos. In the dictionary, it doesn't say anything about it coming from that ch. So I would say no. Okay. Chronos. Yeah, it's just the name of a god. The dictionary doesn't recognize any connection to Chronos with the H. Hey, good question. Okay, good question. Anything else? Just use these times just for help with your studies. If you have questions, anything you're working on, you need help with, especially with Greek studies. That's why we're having these live classes. They double as not only time to talk through topics, but also time to get help with your studies, help with your assignments, and so on. Thank you, Victor. We'll see you next time. Yeah, lesson 2 is ready, Henry, so you can get working on that. I'll get a quiz together as soon as I can. Are the Greek gods the reason words were made, or are they named after them? Are the Greek gods, it's funny, that's sort of a profound philosophical question, because in philosophy we ask, is something good because God does it, or does God do it because it's good? It's like the same question, right? Like it's like the chicken and the egg, which one comes first? Is love good and therefore God is loving because love is good, or is God good and God loves and therefore love is good? That's like the same question you're asking there. So did the names of the gods come first, or did the gods somehow provide those names for things? I think that, if you remember, we talked about this the other day in sacred scripture. The names differ in different languages, so it wouldn't make any sense that the god had some sort of intrinsic name, right? Because his name is different in different languages. Like that god Kronos, what is his name in Latin? Does anybody know what his name is in Latin? Anybody know what the name Kronos is in Latin? No, that's the Greek name. It's Saturn. Okay, at least I think so. Let me check. Yeah, Kronos is Saturnus. Yeah, Saturnus. So you can see it's the same god. He's got two different names. So obviously there's no name that's intrinsic to the god. There's no name that's intrinsic to anything. That's why the names differ in different languages. We talked about that in sacred scripture. Same issue. Same issue. A Spanish person and a French person will look at the same thing, have the same idea in their mind, and give it two different names. That's proof that names are not natural. Okay, Basil, thank you for coming. Yeah, getting into the derivatives of those names would be an interesting study, trying to figure out where they come from. Any other questions, Greek studies? Don't be annoying with the dots, please. I think you guys invent ways to be annoying sometimes. Wish you did what, James? Wish you could invent ways to be annoying? Let's see. Any other questions? Wish you had questions. Well, keep working on your Greek studies and just keep a piece of paper next to you. And as questions pop up, jot them down. And then when we have our meeting, you should just have a piece of paper with some questions jotted down, right? That's what I'd recommend. Just keep a sheet of paper on your desk or wherever you study in your notebook. And then when we meet, just pull out your sheet of questions. Yep. Just so you know, as in spiritual life, that's the point of self-examination you're supposed to do at night also. Before you go to bed, you're supposed to just think about your day, think if there's anything that you did that you shouldn't have done, and just jot it down. And then when you go to confession, you just grab that sheet of paper, bring it with you, and make your confession. Same idea. All right, so no other questions. If there's no other questions, I'm going to get going, get some work done today. I've got a Dominican meeting on Saturday, so I'm going to be busy this weekend. Then I've got a Christmas parade on Sunday because my daughter's in the Nutcracker and all the Nutcracker dancers are in the Christmas parade. So I'm not going to have much time this weekend. So I've got to get some work done. Sounds brutal. Dominican meeting and then a Nutcracker Christmas parade. It's just our town Christmas parade, but all the ballet dancers are in it. My favorite part of Christmas, I like every part. I like decorating. I like Christmas music. I like eating. I like every part of Christmas. I like going to mass on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. I like giving gifts to the kids. I like everybody being home and on break from school and stuff like that. It's just nice time to relax. Every part of Christmas is fun. Well, in North Carolina, unfortunately, we don't have any snow. And I get very frustrated by that because when I was a kid, I lived in New Jersey. There's no chance of a white Christmas in North Carolina. It's very depressing to be singing White Christmas and all these fun songs, jingle bells, dashing through the snow, and look outside and it's just 57 degrees. It's not as much fun as up north. Christmas up north is the best. I miss it. Definitely miss it. Every Christmas season, I say to myself, man, I wish I could move back up north. I would do it just for Christmas. Yeah, it's like 50 degrees. We don't get any snow, so we get rain. So imagine just getting rain in the winter. It's like 48 degrees and raining because there's no snow. It's not cold enough to snow. Winter here in the country, winter is like muddy. Everything gets muddy during the winter. Not, you know how in the north it gets like everything is like dry and crisp and cold. Here it's the opposite. Everything is soft and wet, muddy. There's no grass, there's no leaves. It's pretty depressing. So it's beautiful most of the year, but winter down south really stinks. Yeah, I miss being up north. You know when it snows and you go outside right after it snowed and it's just like totally silent and all the snow is perfect. That's one of the most beautiful things, and none of that down here. None of that. Maybe one of these days, maybe we'll get back up north someday. Yeah, dogs love the snow, right? Yeah, when I was a kid, we had everything. We had snowmobiles and three-wheelers, and we'd get out and have tons of fun. I had an uncle who had everything. He had snowmobiles, three-wheelers, and when it snowed, we'd get out in the roads with the three-wheelers and snowmobiles and ride all around. That was fun. So anyway, we've got Thanksgiving coming up. I love Thanksgiving, and then we've got 3 weeks, and then we're on Christmas break. So that's it. I need to like find a place where I can rent a cabin, like in Maine somewhere for Christmas. Get up in the snow and hang out with my family. No live classes next week. No live classes next week. You're writing ham on here, at least because you like ham. Is that why you wrote ham there? We just got this random ham in upper caps. You love ham. Yeah, ham is the problem in my family, though, is that my mother cooks for the holidays and she makes so much food that she'll make a huge ham and she'll also make a huge turkey and she'll also make a tray of lasagna and she'll also have stuffing and she'll also have mashed potatoes, and it just goes on and on and on. And so you've got all this delicious stuff and you have to like pick one or the other. You can't have all of it. So I usually stick with turkey and end up not eating the ham because she just cooks too much. Stuffing and ham. I don't need to have this conversation right now, a week before Thanksgiving. Yeah, I'm surrounded by good cooks, so Thanksgiving is dangerous. Yep. Mashed potatoes and stuffing and gravy and turkey and cranberry sauce. Well, you're not a glutton if you eat at the right times, right? Gluttony is eating in the wrong way, the wrong things at the wrong times. If it's a time to feast, it's not gluttonous to feast. If you're feasting in the middle of October just because you're a pig and every time you eat like it's Thanksgiving, that's gluttony. Yeah. To have one day set aside as a feast and eat well on that day is not gluttony. It's actually self-control. So we're allowed to enjoy feast days until you get a food coma. Yeah, I know what you mean. All right. Well, that's all for today. I don't want to talk about food, so I'm going to wrap up here. I'm going to close things up here. Get these Greek lessons done. Make sure you're getting assignments done so you get credit for your work. If you need any help, let me know, and I'll see you tomorrow for reasoning and rhetoric class. Okay, so take care, everybody. Get some stuff done, and I'll see you tomorrow. God bless everybody.